Thank you. That was great, Diana. I will just say a couple words about Ideal. So Ideal is the sponsor for today's webinar. What Ideal does is Ideal matches salespeople with their dream jobs based on their max commute distance, their unique fit with the corporate culture, and most importantly, their desired salary. You can learn more and browse open sales roles at www.ideal.com. And with that, we'll open up the question and answer. Thank you, Diana.
You're very welcome. While we're waiting for some of the questions to come in, perhaps I can talk a little bit about, when we're looking at the poll here, on how to be clear and concise. One of the things what I really suggest people to do is to really think things through in terms of 3 things or 5 things, or use, like, if you look at how I did my presentation today, I like to play with words to help you also with remembering as well, like, the 3 C's or the 3 A's. That will help you with presenting a lot more effectively in an interview setting. And one of the common questions I do get is about how do I answer what is my weakness question. The answer to that, I always say, is that your greatest strength could also be your greatest weakness. So in terms of answering that, instead of just saying what your weakness is, you can first start off with what is your greatest strength, and think about, when you use your greatest strength too much, how could that hinder your performance? And talk about the impact it has. But then also what you want to do is really talk about how are you managing it, how are you mitigating it so that it's not a concern. The whole point of a question like this is not to try to make you look bad or fail. It's just really to understand whether you are self-aware and whether you're actually doing something about it. Okay, so there's a question about how should you answer the question to tell me about yourself. That's a great question. I actually have my 6 P's formula. I know I really love using the P's. I've worked with so many clients when they actually follow a formula to answer the tell me about yourself question, they find it so much easier. So take a paper and pen to write this down, and I'll explain. So the first paragraph, and keep in mind your elevator pitch should only be under like 2 minutes, within about 250 to 300 words. The first paragraph is what I call the passion and potential, which is really the who you are, right? Of what are you passionate about and what are you great at? Okay, so give someone a sense of that, and that's like essentially the overarching theme. And then the second paragraph is what I call your past experience and proud accomplishments. This is the proof, the credibility of what you've done. So you want to then go into how many years of experience you have, the common areas that you have, and then you move into specific examples, your proud accomplishment, what you've done to back that up. Now that once you talk about your past, the third paragraph is about the present situation and purpose. So the present situation is like, where are you now in your career? What are you looking for? This brings back to why are we here talking today? And the purpose is really about the why you answer, why you believe you're a great candidate. So you really sum it back up of why you believe you'll succeed in this role. And when you apply this framework, you're going to find it so much easier. One of the common mistakes people make in answering this question is they try to tell their whole life history. They start off saying, well, I graduated from this school, then I moved into that, then I moved into that. While that is good in a chronological way, it doesn't package it in a way that is really marketing yourself. So if you apply those 6 P's, it really highlights your personality and character, your performance, and then going back to your motivation of why are you looking now and why are you the best candidate. Another question is, could you describe a little more about the catchy LinkedIn tagline tip? Sure. I actually have a blog post on this as well. But essentially the catchy LinkedIn tagline, what you want to avoid essentially is the default, which is the job title, right? So if you're in sales, account executive or sales manager, it's boring, right? You could have that, but what you want to do is really, spice it up a little bit. Meaning, you want to highlight, for example, that that you are passionate about technology, passionate about innovation, or helping clients solve the biggest healthcare problems. Something that gives a bit about not only your job title, but essentially of your area of interest and how you add value. What I like to think about, the way I think about it, usually I would say when you think about a tagline, you want to have something, obviously the common keywords, but also add in maybe something about the who you are piece. So it could be like, for me, for example, I'm just making it up right now, like authentic career coach, or passionate about empowering people to own their greatness. So something that is more you, that little sound bite that would generate that curiosity. There's really only about a few hundred characters in there, so it can't be that long. What I suggest, and what you can do, is actually come up with a few and actually test it out to see how many hits you get. And if you have, so who asked that, Richard, I don't have it on me right now, but I actually have actually my most popular blog post on the LinkedIn tagline and summary bio. I'm not sure if Kayla, you can help me find it if you go on my website under LinkedIn, and it will have that most popular blog post on that. It will actually walk you step by step around that. And the next question is, what do you recommend for people without sales experience for their resume and interview? So that's a good question. If you don't have sales experience, but you're trying to get into a sales role. So for me, in terms of for resume and interview, what I recommend first of all as part of the job search, I mean, you really need to rely on networking, right? People really need to see that you have those qualities. Sometimes it's really hard to tell in a resume. What I would suggest though is you can tweak some of the words, right? So I'll give you an example actually. Like my background is in recruiting, and actually, when I was finishing up my contract role with Google, I was actually going for a sales role with LinkedIn. And one of the feedback that they had was, I don't have that traditional sales background. And what I did was I actually tweaked my resume, but obviously not lying, but just use a different wording. So instead of saying just that I recruited for X number of people, when I was at recruiting for the Ivy Business School for executive MBA admissions, candidates actually had to pay to attend an MBA program, right? So instead of saying that I just recruited 100 people, I would say I generated over $10 million of sales, the largest, most profitable program. Right? So you want to reposition your resume that will really showcase that you have those sales qualities. And obviously in an interview, you have to be able to anticipate what are your potential rejection points, right? So for me, when I was meeting with the managing director, it was, I don't really have sales experience. I never carried a quota per se. And what I had to go in, admit that I don't have that, but then back it up saying like, hey, I actually understand your product because I've used it so for many years. I understand the customers because I'm also in that role. I can really relate to them. And in fact, I've also worked with senior level executives during my executive MBA program where I can actually connect with people, the C-level clients as well. So you need to have persuasive points to counter that potential rejection point there, to really convince them as well. So hope that answers the question there, Dale. Thank you for sharing the blog post. I really appreciate it. How would I know if I'm the top 1 to 5% performer with my company? This information isn't usually shared universally. Good question. I mean, if you're being recognized actually if you're getting the President's Club Award and all that, that usually is already indicator that you're in that top percentile. I would just ask the manager or ask HR. That's something that, any hiring managers or senior level executives, they always want to know who their top performers are. So to find that out is really, you have to ask. Would you recommend to hire a professional writer? So I'm guessing that's a professional writer for your resume or LinkedIn. I would say it really depends. It really depends on your writing skills there. Obviously having a professional writer could really polish up your resume. And what I really do recommend, if you do that, because I actually used to offer a resume writing service. I don't do that anymore. What you want to make sure is when you're working with a writer that they actually have a perspective on understand what employers are looking for as well. I have seen, because I work as a recruiter as well, I can actually tell when a resume is professionally written because of how it's written. And you want to make sure the language is not necessarily too flowery. It really needs to highlight the accomplishments and results. And And I will also check that if you're working with that writer is whether they actually have experience, whether in recruiting or actually working in a corporate setting and actually done a lot of resume reading, not just writing as well, like screening candidates as well. So I guess the comment is I found that many prospective employers lack the background to appreciate the talent before them. It's an interesting perspective. I find that what I do find in the setting is that oftentimes employers have that expectation or of what their ideal candidate looks like. And it is really hard sometimes to change that mindset because they already have, it's based on the people that they're working with who are maybe the top performers, and they will say, I want someone exactly like them. And so in order to change that perspective, it is really up to us as a recruiter or you as the job seeker to help them see it from a different perspective. And you really need to be able to have that conversation to see the potential in you. What I have found, if you're looking to make a change in a different industry or profession, it is certainly possible. It's possible. I have supported people, many people, to do this. What's really important is I would even suggest that you need to have at least what I call like 3 to 5 solid references if people can really back you up that you are someone who is with high potential and can be a fast learner and get up to speed really quickly. Are there any tips to specifically getting hired at a startup? That's a great question, Kim. I think that with a startup, I think sometimes because it may be hard to find even like, what are the other list of startup companies, if you do have those, what I suggest, honestly, it's really connecting directly with them. Like find out which of those companies. And a way, first of all, to find out what they're hiring is one of the lists. Sometimes I say to like salespeople is like even in technology, like Deloitte's Fast 50 list in 50 fastest growing tech companies in Canada, and that could be a signal that that they are growing. And so from there, oftentimes with startup companies, they actually do not have an HR department or recruiter. So what I would suggest is either contact the founder or contact whoever is like the head of sales. Just contact them and have that conversation. They may not even have a formal role yet, but what I would suggest is that find out like what is it that you're interested about this company. Give that motivation of why, and then give them like share with them what you think you can do for them. Sometimes it could be actually creating that role as well. And what I would suggest, if there is not an opening at this time, think about how you want to stay in touch with this potential employer, right? Connect with them on LinkedIn, share with them something valuable so that they remember you. And what I would also say with what I have found is also with startup companies is that because I connect with some too, is that sometimes they know they're going to be hiring, but they don't know what exactly that role looks like. And I find as a potential job seeker, you want to give them information to help them imagine what it could potentially be like based on your own experience of how you can help them succeed. The question on what your recommendation to answering the question, how large is your Rolodex? As a recruiter, I always hear that. It's like the employer to say, I want someone with a large Rolodex. I want someone who knows so and so. I mean, to be honest with you, my perspective is what's more important. First of all, you want to answer like the contacts that you may have or the industries that you have. What they want to know is whether are you starting from scratch or do you actually are you well connected person, right? So you want to be able to answer that. But in terms of the Rolodex, I think it all goes back to positioning at the end of the day. Because when you think about it, the reason why they say want a large Rolodex is that, are you someone who's going to take a lot of time hunting, or are you already a relationship builder and you can really, knock on these doors and be able to open you to many different opportunities at the end of the day. I have found, for example, actually recently, with another startup company I'm working with, the hiring manager says that he wants someone with retail clients, like they want retail rolodex. And to be honest, sometimes what I respond to them is that, what's actually more important is that you want to find someone who can also really close the deal and who really understand this industry. And it doesn't really matter what vertical or industry that we work in. If they're a solid salesperson, they can easily build that business up from ground up as well. So the question from David, this last question, is how do you recommend balancing a salesperson's LinkedIn profile between outlining one's achievement, exceeding quota, to communicate with your prospective clients? But that's a great question. I think this is where, if you don't want to have that quota achievement in there, I think what you want to do is really then the tone should be about, if you're actually using like LinkedIn to find clients, it's all about how you add value. Right? It's more about who you are. If you, and I often see this is about, what do you care about? How do you help clients? And it really brings out even your methodology. That is already an indicator that that you could be a high potential talent already. So if you don't want to brag about that, that's totally fine. But then you should still at least, for example, have, if you don't have numbers, at least indicating if you had like achievements, right? These awards that you can put in the achievement section there. So there's certainly a way to do it. I've actually seen it. What people do, especially, is that they use the bio summary to focus on the clients that they're serving, and then the experience section has more about their own experience there.